I think with that, it is just about time. So again, just kind of some housekeeping stuff here before we get started. Thank you to everybody for joining. We really appreciate it. We're really excited for this class today. As always, this class will be recorded and then I'll put it up on our Facebook, our Instagram, and our YouTube after. So if you have any friends, any customers, or anybody who was not able to join live and you'd like to share that recording with them, please feel free to do so. If we could make sure that we are on mute. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I'm gonna go ahead and have Janie and Giulio spotlighted on their video the whole time, so they should be the biggest person on your screen the whole time so we can see their beautiful faces and their beautiful home. And with that, I'm gonna go ahead and let Chuck Bishop, our purchasing manager for Kindred Vines, give us our introduction.
Okay, thank you, Emily, and welcome everybody. As Emily mentioned, I'm the purchasing manager for Kindred Vines Import Company, and super excited to have Giulio Parentini and his lovely wife Janie joining us today. Giulio is the CEO of Morris Farms, and Morris Farms is one of the longest running partners that we have in the Kindred Vines portfolio, certainly one of the most important from Italy. And the relationship started years and years ago with Adolfo Parentini, Giulio's father, and Giulio has since taken over the reins and with running the company, traveling the world, and spreading the good word of Morris Farms. And nobody relays the excitement and the joy of Italian wine like Giulio does, and we love having him as a partner. And I'm really excited to have him here today to talk not only about his estate within the greater region of Maremma, a little bit about Tuscany as well, and how the Maremma compares to some of the other wine growing regions that you may know from Tuscany. So you have, of course, Chianti Classico, you have Montalcino, Bulgari, but Maremma is a really, really very exciting area where Giulio is making his wines. The varying in the varying terroir and the climate, proximity to the sea, as well as elevation. It really is a beautiful, beautiful area. And if you've seen some of the videos that Giulio sent in already to us, they're very lucky to have a beautiful home there in Massa Marittima, overlooking the Maremman landscape. So, very excited to, like I said, to have Giulio and Janie with us today to go through some of the wines and talk about their region, about Tuscany in general. And once again, as Emily mentioned, we will be asking Janie and Giulio some questions throughout this broadcast here. So if you do have any, throw some questions into the chat. We'll try to address those then, maybe throughout if they're relevant, or towards the end if we haven't covered it already, of course. And yeah, please make sure you are on mute as well. And to kick this off, we will not start with Giulio and his fresh haircut, but we're going to go with a nice video that we have to show to get you a little more acclimated. So take it away.
At 15 minutes from Massa Marittima, among the green hills overlooking the sea, we find Morris Farms, a company producing some of the best wines in the Maremma. In the vineyard, we'll be meeting Giulio Parentini, the managing director, with his cousin Ranieri Morris. Working side by side, the two cousins have dynamically developed their winery and produce delicious, modern and authentic wines, which are an absolute credit to the family tradition.
Morris Farms is a family business. I mean, my family came more than 250 years ago from Spain. This is the explanation of the name Morris, that for sure doesn't sound Italian. The company is owned by 6 siblings, 3 brothers and 3 sisters. My mom is one of these sisters. And the company name was decided by my uncle in 1971. I have an uncle who lives in San Francisco, and he decided this English name for the company.
It was actually Giulio's father who recognized the enormous potential of the Maremma for the production of quality wines, capable of competing in an international market. Morris Farms own 2 wineries. The first is located in the production area of the Morellino DOCG, and the second in the DOC Montereggio region.
I mean, my father planted in 1990 the vineyards of Avvoltore. He saw the potential of this soil. He decided to plant the 15 hectares that we are still using now for the single vineyard wine, the Avvoltore. Produced just in the best vintage. If it is not good, we decide to skip. When the fruit, when the grapes are good and we find that the skin is perfectly ripe, we decide that is the moment to harvest. And when is the moment, we need to be as fast as possible. We have to crop all the grapes and bring them inside the cellar to start the fermentation. You won't come and visit the cellar with me, and we can do a tour. We can drink a glass of wine.
We follow the grapes into the cellar, where they are stripped of their stems, pressed, and poured into large tanks, where fermentation begins. The yeast on the grape skin comes into contact with sugar and turns it into alcohol. Fermentation lasts a few days. The color of the grape juice as it slowly turns into wine is absolutely beautiful. If you taste it, you can still sense the sugar not turned into alcohol yet.
That's one of the beautiful parts of Italian wine in general, Tuscany and Maremma wines in particular. The biodiversity and the geodiversity. Every few miles, the grapes result completely different, and we have different expression of the terroir.
Okay, guy before knew his job.
All right, so that was our video. We just wanted you guys to be able to picture, you know, where Giulio and Janie are and what they're talking about. So I guess to start us off, Giulio, can you just tell us about the Tuscan wine region in general, but especially the specific area that you're in of Maremma?
Okay, so as I was saying before in the previous video, Maremma, first of all, I will try to speak slower than before. Look, doesn't look like, but I was young in the period. And my wife is here to correct me and to help when I will not pronounce correctly certain words. So it will be an advantage for you. So first of all, Tuscany is a very well famous and known region of Italy to produce wine, and we are very lucky. We are in a less known part of this region, in the southwest part. We are close to the coast. We are immediately south Bolgheri, and even if Bolgheri became so famous, Maremma still remain a less known area. It still doesn't have the same brand, the same importance in a lot of customers, but between producer and Italian especially is becoming more and more an important brand. We are proud to say that this product is not just from Tuscany, but this product is from Maremma. We have a very ancient tradition of farmers, of local products, a lot of different agriculture production, very great quality result. Wasn't famous, the wine production, until the last years. Honestly, the wine production in this area, when my father started to believe that we could make good wines, wasn't so easy to introduce. My father started to invest in this business before before this area was still famous. People thought that it was crazy. They thought that, oh, you are too close to the coast area and you can just make salty wines. Your wines will not be so great as other wines from Chianti, Brunello. And my father said, why shouldn't my wine remind a little, I mean, Bordeaux, for example, Bordeaux. And now we discover that this climate close to the coast, this saltiness in the wine, this wind that drives the grapes, it's an advantage. It's usually a weather of good harvest. Usually we can produce great wines with structure and power, and now we are having more knowledge to move more to elegance flavor. We are trying to make wines that are elegant and not just too much power in the glass. This is one of the fascinating things of the wine, is how with the same ingredients, with the same grapes, Sangiovese or similar blend with Sangiovese, you can obtain so many different wines, so many different flavors. It depends on the way of when you crop or on how much maturation you do of the skins during fermentation, for example. Or all these are little details that help the producer and the winemaker to make completely different wines, even if they are based on the same grapes. I have here a selection of 5 red wines, all based on Sangiovese grape, but each one with his own expression and personality that makes each one of them unique.
Yeah, thank you. I guess if you could also just start by telling us a little bit about the history of Morris Farms and kind of how you came into your role as winemaker and CEO there.
Okay. So usually to explain Morris Farms is important to start with a name, because Morris Farms doesn't sound so Italian. We are a Spanish family, but we came from Spain almost 300 years ago now, and we live in Tuscany since generations. It's a family business. I have heritage this from my father, and he heritage from his father-in-law, who took from his father, and so on. So I'm probably the 5th generation. Now I'm in charge with my cousin Ranieri of continuous this business with the same idea, with the same mentality that my father taught to us. When my father arrived, he found already an agricultural company. Morris Farms was taking care of the vineyards, taking care of the land, without the same experience, without the same knowledge that we have now, without the same important role for the wine. The wine wasn't the core business, was just part of the production. And as I was saying before, my father had the idea, had the thought, had the belief that the wine production could have been great in this area, still not well known, still part not well known of Tuscany. So he started changing the mentality of production, the idea of a way of production, changing even the mind of the workers. When my father arrived and he started saying that we have to do a green harvest, wasn't very easy to communicate with all the farmer. Believed that as more as a grape was producing, as more as the wine was good. I don't have a personal experience, but I heard about a story in which they were telling me that Sangiovese is even survived to a lot of changes because it was a grape that was able to produce a huge amount of grapes, a vine that was able to have a huge amount of grapes per vine. And this was good for the mentality of 60, 70 years ago. They discovered that making produce it less, you could produce good wines. But just to give an idea about how many changes you have to do when you focus on this business. It's a sort of cooperation from the vineyard, the grapes, the mentality of the workers, the work in the cellar. My father started making by himself the wine with not a lot of experience, just a lot of passion on drinking wine, and personal study of books, of reading, talking with other people, speaking with other producers. They were helping and cooperating with him. He introduced this wine to other more famous producers, restaurants. My father went to the most important restaurant, introducing his wine personally, and from each one of these experiences, he was collecting some more knowledge, more experience and knowledge for future progress. Unfortunately, without being a chemical and a winemaker, my father wasn't expert to manage a particular situation. So it happened that in a good harvest with great grapes, my father did a good wine, and in a bad harvest with not great grapes, my father was making bad wines. So his idea was to look for a winemaker. And he started around asking opinion to other producers and so on. And he tried a couple, but they didn't have a lot of passion. They didn't have a lot of knowledge, experience. And so he didn't like, because they found what was in the winery, but they didn't work with the same passion of my father. We are speaking that my father was barely 30 years old, 34, 33. So he believed a lot in this dream, and he was doing his best to realize it. So my father was introduced to an important, very famous winemaker for that period. That was, I don't remember who introduced to him. Do you remember? No, sorry.
Usually I remember the names, but not in this case.
And so my father was introduced to this important winemaker, Giulio Gambelli. And my father went to him to ask, please, do you want to become my winemaker? And this guy said, look, I'm pretty old, I'm getting old and so on. I would suggest you one of my, what's meant to?
Apprentices.
One of my apprentices. That was a chemical who did then a lot of apprentices close to several winemakers. He traveled a lot in France too. And he was working for few companies in that period. I mean, we were one of his first companies who trusted on him, and he was 24, 25 years old, so pretty young. And my father, he introduced himself to him, and they started immediately sharing their idea, their passion, drinking wine, discovering what was going to happen, what was happening in all Tuscany, in all that area. And my father still remember the day in which they were walking in one of the vineyards that considered now all of them, they were destroyed and replanted. But one of the vineyards that was considered the best one that we had, planted in the 1970s, so a 15 years old vineyard, where they had a mix of different varietals. Because before they didn't focus on having vineyards of just one varietal. It was even considered a plus to have the complexity of a blend, but instead of blending the grapes in the cellar, they were blending the grapes already in the vineyard. Now we know it is a mistake, because each grape has different ripeness period. But for that period, they did even more mistake when they were crafting the plants. So for several reasons, the vineyard was blended already with Sangiovese and what my workers were calling the French grapes. That was Cabernet Sauvignon, but they didn't even know the name. What the winemaker wanted was to take note of the vines of Sangiovese and the vines of Cabernet Sauvignon, and doing different harvesting for these two grapes. This was one of the first big change that the winemaker required to make good wines. We know that the wine is made by fruit, a fruit that we call grape, and simply when the grape is good, you will have easier a good wine. And so the winemaker said that to have a good grape, you need to crop the grapes in the perfect ripeness moment. And in Sangiovese and Cabernet, they have weeks of distance. Sangiovese is mid of September here in Tuscany, and Cabernet Sauvignon easily is first or second week of October. So the winemaker required this. This was one of the first things seen by the employees like a waste of time. Why should we go twice in the same vineyard? But my father was able to convince them, and this was one of the first big change. And then during the fermentation process, the winemaker started teaching us a lot of details that brought our wines to just a simple farmer product to a wine that has more constant and more potentiality of be well appreciated all around the world.
The challenges that my father-in-law faced, the changes that he made in the production, and the legacy that he's left cannot be overlooked. It was really, it wasn't simply just changing a couple of things to make a better quality wine. It was changing the mentality of both his employees and the family that he married into. So to start doing the green pruning, cutting off sometimes 50% of the grapes on all of the vines, it was considered blasphemous by the family and by the workers themselves, that those were blessings from God and they're just throwing them on the ground. But he really proved himself to show that the lower yield creates a much higher quality product.
There is a letter that was written by my grandfather that was worried about what his son-in-law was doing to the production and the managing of the winery. And positively, there is even the will written by my grandfather, in which the only name mentioned is my father, Adolfo, because of the great success that he brought the winery. So basically 20 years after my father started, my grandfather died, but my father started with his father-in-law pretty worried about this decision, and my father-in-law died riding and remembering the great success that my father did. And I think that this is the best present, the best satisfaction that my father can receive and can recognize.
Right, as the son-in-law that came in and changed things around. And this is usually where Giulio starts crying.
Okay. So, now with the winemaker, what's happened? The wine is still made by good grapes. One of the great things of Attilio Pagli, that is the name of our winemaker, is that he cares to have good grapes, and in the cellar is really as more natural as possible. It doesn't add strange things. It doesn't correct. I mean, when there are the supplier before the harvest season that they are writing the winery, showing me all the products available, starting from tannins, color corrector, extractor, and so on, I don't even know that could exist so many products, because my winemaker wants the grapes. And I reply to them, I put a lot of grapes in my wine and I don't need to buy so many other stuff. I save money on that.
It's the same mentality that you find all over Italy, but certainly Tuscany in particular, when it comes to food. If you start with good, healthy, fresh ingredients, you really don't need to add that much to them.
So this makes the wine not constant, not identical vintage after vintage, because we don't correct. We obtain what the nature gives to us, what the weather condition. And when you follow the product, the production, the weather, starting since the winter, arriving until the harvest, so 12 months after almost, we can appreciate, we can enjoy even what are considered wines, because we recognize all the dry summer. The wine is very flexible in the weather condition. I'm sorry.
I think I fixed it. I think we're good. Sorry, we were just getting a little feedback there.
You blocked there.
Yeah, I think we're all good now.
I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
I don't know if I'm talking too much. I don't know if there is any question. I'm trying to keep, even if it doesn't look like, I'm trying to keep.
Hey guys.
For my standard, Chuck knows me and he knows that I'm doing my best to speak as slow as possible.
No, you're doing well, Giulio. This has been really interesting so far.
Yeah,
I guess
Giulio,
if you could tell us a little bit about, in your view, what makes your vineyards special and like what sets Maremma apart from the rest of Tuscany as a region?
Do you want to answer this question?
Yeah, I was just speaking to my father-in-law today, and what he saw, the potential that he saw in this area when he first came to Maremma was certainly the climate, the exposure to the sun, the elevation, as you had mentioned before, and the proximity to the sea, which gives the wine such a great salinity. But because of the maritime effect in our area of coastal Tuscany, the seasons are going to be less risky. Therefore, we're going to be doing less work anyway in the cantina when we already start with a product that is that survived in a very healthy way.
For me, the answer is, for me, it's home. I know this area and I'm grown up here and I love it. Obviously, there are area of Tuscany with a longer experience and we still have to learn. We never learn enough. In Maremma, maybe as probably Janie is discovering and suffering more and more every day, we have a great potentiality and so many bad marketing approach. We are so bad to sell our area, our products. We are horrible. Every day she's disgusted by what she learns.
Well, I'm doing what I can to give justice to this place that is relatively undiscovered for such a famous region like Tuscany. But no, we really have a hard time selling ourselves here, probably because, you know, it's off the beaten path. It's a little bit more difficult to arrive here, and once you've already taken a transatlantic flight, the last thing you want to do is get on a bunch of curvy Tuscan roads for 2 hours. But once people do arrive, they start to understand the fresh produce is just unbelievable. The sun almost every single day is as strong as can be. And it's just an all-around, the quality of life is so incredibly high here. It's been wonderful to spend the last year and a half.
Yeah. So for sure, I mean, thanks to my long relationship with Kindred, I'm very happy and proud to say that since the last 17 years, probably, I was able to welcome here in Maremma and in the winery so many, I want to say customer because this is the correct word at the beginning, but then they became friend. This is one of the beautiful things of the wine, that after the second glass, you are no more a customer, you become my friend. And we were able to create this relationship that was still continuing. And I was proud to have people who decided to change the trip in Italy. Instead of doing just Rome, Venice, Milan, Naples, and so on, someone said, okay, let's try to detour in Maremma because I met that guy, because I want to discover that area, because I like that wine, for different reasons. And I think, and I'm pretty positive that most of them left
thinking it was one of the better decisions they made on that trip.
Maybe it's not the first region that you have to visit at your first trip in Italy, but probably at the second you have to think about Maremma. I mean, it's something that you can discover another area with a different experience. So about the wine, a winemaker is very, very important to drive the fermentation, the production of the wine, starting with the grapes. And our winemaker started as a chemical. He knows the chemical chemist. And this is why I was looking for her close to me. And Attilio was is able to know the chemical reaction of the perfume, of the color, of the structure of the wine. When he speaks to me, he speaks very easy. I mean, sometimes you think, oh, why this guy? I mean, it's just this and this. But in his mind, he knows the kind of grapes, he knows the story of that vineyard, he knows what he's looking for, he knows the kind of wood for the barrique that we are going to use. In his mind has all this view in one sip, and he tells us when is the right moment to divide the skin, how long we have to continue with fermentation, what is the temperature of the fermentation, when is the moment of cropping. It's fascinating how, thanks to his long experience, he's able to make look like very simple everything related to the wine production. It makes easy things that are much more complex than what we believe. If I just think about his rules about winemaking, I would say, okay, this is easy. It's when the things are slightly different or complicated that you understand why I pay him, because he's able to manage the situation.
So many different variables that go into each and every bottle.
We have so many reasons to complain about the weather production. I mean, there is an L section for the wine producer. If something happens, we always find the negative part of it.
A special place in hell for a wine producer to complain that not enough rain, there's too much rain, not enough sun.
Yeah, consider how many variables there are about winemaking. It's insane. And those that are complication are even the things that makes the wine special. The beauty of drinking a wine, it's that you always not just drink that producer, you not just drink that blend, and you drink a vintage. You drink this. You can drink the same wine of the same producer of different vintage, and you will find that the idea, the direction is that one, but the final glass, it's different, because the first ingredient is different, the grapes, because the weather is never identical, can be similar, can remind, but is never identical year after year. The wine is a live product. It is. I mean, I'm proud that my wine is not always the same. Coca-Cola never changed because they have recipes. My wines are different. Vintage after. We try to do the best.
Speaking of winemaking and climate and all that kind of stuff, what do you feel like is the biggest challenge that a winemaker nowadays has to face? Is it more nature-driven, like climate change, or is it something more marketing-driven, like the customer and their demand for different things?
So, yeah, one of the climate change is a problem, and even to explain that there are more micro area than people can understand. So it's how do you say, it's complicated when I have to speak with people who live all over the world where exactly Maremma is. But it's important to understand that every few miles you have different weather condition, different temperature and result. And so the winemaker needs to adapt his product, his process, depending on the weather condition. And for example, Jenny was reminding me, a vintage that was a challenge was more a challenge to communicate to the customer than just to communicate, than just producing. Because I'm referring to the 2002 vintage. It happened that it's known like a very rainy harvest, and the people, customers, were nervous, they were scared, they were afraid. But this is not completely right, because you can't judge all Italy like the same weather condition. Every few miles you have different hills, different mountains, different distance of the seaside, and so on, that makes the weather result slightly different. And this difference makes different the grapes. For Morris Farms here in Maremma, 2002 wasn't, especially the winery that is close to the seaside, wasn't a so rainy harvest like other part. We were able to crop wonderful grapes, wonderful juicy grapes that we were proud of. They were great in the glass, great final bottles, final result, but very difficult to communicate to the people, to the customer, when it was the moment of selling.
especially when a journalist might say, oh, the 2002 from Tuscany was a terrible vintage, and you really have a good product in front of you, and it's very difficult to sell. And it was very eye-opening recently, maybe a year ago. We sat down with several journalists and my father-in-law, Adolfo Parentini, and we had a vertical tasting of Avvoltore, our flagship wine. Vertical meaning 10 different vintages, I believe it was. Tasting each vintage, and the 2002 in particular, which was the one that was written off as the bad vintage, bad, too much rain, really surprised everyone at the table. And it was so interesting to learn about the challenges and blessings that went along with each of those vintages as we tasted through.
I think that a good winemaker has one of his challenges is to be able to make a wine that is good for the world, for the customer, but still a wine that he likes to do. I think that a good winemaker should be able to make a wine that people appreciate without losing his passion on making this wine, and without using as many products as before. So without becoming just a mixologist, a winemaker who still continues with his passion of his job, who find what is the right blend, what the people can like, because obviously we can't do the wine that just me and Jenny like, because we couldn't finish all the production, but we must still remain close to our first idea and focus. I think a good winemaker now with so much technology, so much things, so many possibilities, needs to be knowledgeable, needs to know what's around, needs to know the global market and taste, but still to continue to make a wine that tastes of that area, not to make a standard wine that you can make everywhere. You have to recognize the grapes and the area of production, and this a wine producer, a winemaker, very proud of himself.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a favorite vintage? I know you mentioned 2002 that the journalist said wasn't necessarily the best. Do you have a favorite in recent years?
Me or her?
You.
Both.
When, like I was saying before, any vintage, when you know everything, makes me very proud of. We are getting more expert. Our vineyards are getting more ready, more mature, better result. With the rosé wine, every vintage we are trying to do better. So I loved the 2018 vintage, but I'm very proud of the 2019. I think that we have done a great improvement in the quality. About the red, usually I love my red when they are slightly older. Because of my work, I drink very often the recent vintage, because are the vintage that I have to promote. But when it happens that I find an old vintage of one of my red wine, usually the oldest vintage is my favorite. Really, probably if I pass the 20 year, I start saying that the wine is tired. But when I'm less than 20 years, I love that vintage. So when I can drink one of my wines older, usually is my favorite vintage. I love when they are young, but I think that they give, especially of the last 3 wines, they give their best if they are aged longer. Sometimes when I have this opportunity, I think that I have my best satisfaction.
Speaking of your wines, can you tell us about each of the wines that you have in front of you and just tell us about what they are and how you make them?
So starting from the white, we have a Vermentino. It's a grape that is well known in the coast area of Tuscany, in Sardinia, and in Corsica. Obviously.
And that's another thing that sets Maremma apart from the rest of Tuscany, is that because of the maritime effect, it has so many similarities to the islands of the Mediterranean that are just out the window there.
It's blended with a 10% Viognier. It's done just with cement tanks, actually. Cement tank fermentation. And it's a crispy, dry mineral white wine. It's perfect to start a meal. It's great with fried food. It's great alone. Vermentino is usually well known for his mineral flavor structure. We put some Viognier to give to enrich the wine with the flour and give more fruity and complexity. So normally the white wine are wines that you expect to drink young, but if you start with a good white wine, you can easily drink those white wine 3, even 4 years old, and you obviously see that the wine is changed, but they become I mean, aging flavor, and they become a different structure and result, but still a well-balanced wine to drink. After the Vermentino, we have a new wine that we have just introduced. It's a blend, it's an Ansonica, and the name is Amor because reminds Ansonica Morris Farms. It doesn't look like possible, but it wasn't used in any Italian wine, this name.
No one thought to name a wine Amor before.
And so
this year.
I couldn't believe that it was possible that this name was still free. And an interesting things about this grape Ansonica is that it's the last white grapes, and sometimes even the last grapes in total that gets in the cellar. Just to give you an idea of the complexity of the harvest, the Viognier gets in the cellar usually late August, early September. The Ansonica to make our Amor was cropped the 11th of October, so over a month and a half, almost a month and a half.
And those two grapes were sitting side by side in the exact same vineyard, but they have about a month's different of ripening time, harvest time. Different
skin, different structure. My father was making an Ansonica in the 1988 and he stopped in 1994. His Ansonica was fermented in barrique. Our Ansonica is fermented in stainless steel tanks. I'm enjoying this wine since few months. I find it is very clean, complex, but not difficult to drink. I'm sure for my experience and what people taught me that Ansonica is even a white wine with great potential of aging, but unfortunately is impossible to know as long as you will not experience. So I will see how the wine will evolve, will result in the next months, and I will try to experience that, because that's the only way to know when a wine is good, when you wait a while. After the Amor, we have our Rosamundi, that is the Rosato that I was talking to you before. About the Rosato, there is an interesting story that Janie loves. Sometimes for a wine producer, a lot of things are normal because we know that we have to do this in this way. But for a customer from Jenny helps me a lot to have a different point of view of my normal life. So thanks to her point of view, I can learn things that...
it's a lot more charming than he'd have you let on.
And so the Rosato, we have always done in our winery, but we restarted to bottle it just since 7, 8 vintages. Because before we were just making a Rosato from bleeding the Sangiovese of our red wines. This is a Rosato made from Sangiovese grape dedicated to make a Rosato. You can't believe, but there is a huge difference. The challenge when we do a Rosato is to stress as less as possible the skin. We don't want the skin touching the juice too long. We don't want the wine taking too much color. We don't want the wine lose its bouquet. So basically it's a red grape that we manage like a white grape. Oxygen, light, and temperature are our enemies. So We crop fresh, we decrease even the temperature, we immediately divide the skin, we softly press. What we are doing every year is that our goal, our target is to have the grapes as pressed as less as soft. So to obtain these in the last years, we are increasing the grapes cropped, and we are keeping the amount of bottles that we look for to bottle. So this means higher cost, higher complication. To optimize everything, we have, and this is the part that Jenny appreciates, we have an important local market of bulk wine. We obtain skins that are not completely ripe to make an important red, but great to make a good rosé. And we are obtaining them more and more. And these grapes, those grapes that we obtain, we use mixed with our grapes in a bulk red wine that we sell locally. I don't want to sell this outside Italy because we are not good to challenge with entry-level, very low-cost red wine, but it's always sold locally like a tradition of Morris family. Before my father arrived, before the bottling quality production, we already had a wine shop where the customer were able to buy our bulk red wine, for example.
And that's one of the things that sets Morris Farms as a winery apart from others, perhaps, is that they have so much loyalty in the local market, and they're able to, instead of bottling 100% of their grape production, to be able to have this bulk wine where people come up with their big plastic jugs and fill up liters at a time. That's been a loyalty developed over the many years that your family's been in the area.
Yeah, the first shop is opened in 1974, but before already we were making wine.
And even the bulk wine has to be good, because he can't go into the piazza if he's going to run into his neighbors and they're going to have a problem with the wine that they're all drinking.
6,000-7,000 people around, they know pretty well who I am. So none of this wine, probably the winemaker can appreciate this. When I go to the winemaker, I don't go to him with 100 liters of Vermentino grapes and I tell him you have to bottle this and I have to bottle 100 liters. No, I go to the winemaker after the harvest with dozens and dozens of different bottles of each one representing a tank, with the Viognier, with the Parentini, but more than one tank of the same grapes. And I ask the winemaker to choose what is the best of just a part. I don't need to bottle everything of the Sangiovese, of the Ansonica. I tell him you have to choose just the best, and the rest can be sold, can be left like bulk wine, and you don't need to bottle. Oh. The next red wines we start. We have the Mandriolo, that is our explosion of red fruit. It's produced from the clay soil estate. It's a blend of the Sangiovese 18% and 20% of the other grapes. Moroglione Scansano is an appellation that exists since 1978. When my father started making this wine, he didn't even know what the appellation was born in 1978, but my father started in 1981, not because we didn't have the grapes, but because my grandfather wasn't caring about what a DOC was. He was caring about producing wines and producing grapes, and so he was making just table wine. It was my father who went to him, to his father-in-law, telling, Mr. Morris, can I try to bottle and produce a DOC wine? And this is how Morris Farms Moroglione Scansano was born. Moroglione Scansano means Sangiovese from Scansano area. After the Moroglione Scansano, we have the first red wine from that goes in barrique, Barba Spinosa. Barba Spinosa is a fantasy name. Trust me, it's not easy at all to give a name to a wine. This is inspired by a novel book written by my great-grandfather. Barba Spinosa literally speaks thorny beard. when I told Janie, can you smell the tobacco, the spicy, the leather? She said, oh, I imagine Gandalf smoking a pipe in front of a fireplace, drinking a glass of wine. And so I said, okay, my cousin found a good name. I love the Barba Spinosa for his, I like to describe like almost balsamic, but not balsamic vinegar, balsamic fresh, rosemary flavor.
Balsam pine.
Balsam pine. It tastes like sap, for example. It's a red wine with a great, it has great potential, but it's not difficult to understand. I think that it's important to learn the wines, to start drinking even entry-level wine like Mandriolo. They train your palate, and then you will look for something more and something more. If you are not well trained, you're not expert, it's better if you start in this way, in my opinion. We focus a lot on the quality price. The value is very important. In each one of these wine, we try to offer in the glass a better value, a better complexity, even for a few dollars more of difference. The last two red wines are the best wine from the sandy and the clay soil estate. Morellino di Scansano Riserva, it's to explain how Riserva di Morellino can age using the barrique, but not new barrique, 2 or 3 years old, because the sandy soil makes a soft, elegant tannin, not too complex, not too strong, and so we don't want to cover the taste of a wine with too much taste of wood. And we finish with Avvoltore, that is our flagship, is the most representative wine of my father, the one that he started making in 1988 with Attilio Pagli. Avvoltore is the slang word to call the hock of Maremma. It's not hawk, it's hawk, I have problem with the H, I'm sorry. It's a blend of 75 Sangiovese, 20 Cabernet Sauvignon, 5% Syrah. It's a wine, the last two wines are bottled and produced just in the vintage that we are proud of. As I was already telling you before, all the vintage are not the same, all the vintage are not identical. Just when a vintage is good enough, we decide to bottle, and we really skip some vintage. Fortunately, not very often, but we don't have Avvoltore 2014, we don't have Avvoltore 2008, no 2005, no Riserva 2002. So depends on the vintage, we produce one or the other, or we miss both, like in 1996. And trust me, it's very hard when we miss one of those wines. It's a very difficult decision, but we like to be known like quality wine producer. So when a customer, when someone sees this wine, this label, we are proud and we hope that they trust enough in Morris Farms, in Morris family, and in the label of the wine, being sure that this is the best that we were able to bottle for that vintage.
So obviously with your lineup of wines there, Sangiovese is a very important grape varietal for you. Can you speak to why Sangiovese is so successful in your area, and kind of what about your area makes that such a great fit?
Why? Well, you're probably the more technical, but as he was saying, you know, the Sangiovese grape is a grape that's typical all over Tuscany, and Tuscany is a huge region. We're in Maremma, which is the sub-region of Tuscany on the coast, and Maremma is a huge region. So there's diversity all across the board, and the Sangiovese expresses itself differently in every little micro region, like he was explaining, microclimates and the land. And Morris Farms has 2 different estates. That's why there's an S at the end of Morris Farms. And Giulio was alluding to the fact that we have a clay soil estate and a sandy soil estate. So for something like the Morellino di Scansano, which comes from the sandy soil estate, he was saying the roots don't struggle so much. They have a much more easy time growing and thriving. So they produce a much softer, more elegant tannin. Whereas the Sangiovese that comes from the clay soil estate, the grapes are planted mostly on pretty steep hills and have a really tough time, which is great for them because they deliver much more complexity in the clay soil estate.
Very cool.
compared inside the area of production brings to different ripeness. So this Sangiovese has for sure a great acidity for wine matching, but is not bitter. Is a well ripe, easy to appreciate grape. So we never decided to base our wine with international varieties. We have we blend our Sangiovese with other grapes, but we still base all of this wine on Sangiovese grape. There is a story that I like to say when about these international varieties, that is regarding the Syrah. When my father planted the Syrah the first time, it was 1990. He didn't even know the name of this grape. He didn't know if it was red or white. Trust me, 1990 looked like yesterday, but for the wine experience, the wine world is another century, is another millennium, is centuries ago. I mean, a lot of people, a lot of the market is changed. And the winemaker said, I think that in this soil, the Syrah could make a good result. My father planted in 1990. In 1994, he obtained a great, spicy, dark, intense color juice that he started blending in our most important wine, Avvoltore. My father said, okay, let's plant the Syrah in the sandy soil estate too. In 1995, he planted the Syrah, and it has not the same richness, the same complexity. It is a good grape, it is a good wine, but it's more anonymous, and so we use for our Morellino di Scansano Classico. We don't even use in our Riserva Morellino. I think that this is a good explanation that in our area, in our condition, with the same knowledge, experience, few miles of distance makes two completely different wine, even using the same grape. So I like to say those are Italian wine from Tuscany, from Maremma, with grapes that are named international, but they are grown in our area. So we have seen that the Sangiovese is very important for the important structure of our wines, but blending with our grapes is very important too. And another important things about the grapes Sangiovese is that we blend different clones. For me, that is a producer is important, but I've seen that people don't realize that of the Sangiovese, in one vineyard we can have 3-4 different clones, and being a clone is like a cousin. So you are the same grape, the same fruit, but finally you can even look like very different. One clone of Sangiovese can bring more color, one clone of Sangiovese can bring more perfume, and so on. And mixing different clones of Sangiovese help us even in our complexity. So when I say 90% Sangiovese and 10% of other grapes, in the 90% of Sangiovese, I already have a blend of Sangiovese itself. I mean, for me that I'm doing this every day, it's much easier than explaining. So I'm sorry if it looks like it's complicated, but it's easier.
The blend in Avvoltore, 75% Sangiovese, 20% Cabernet Sauvignon, and 5% Syrah.
Can you believe that a lawyer from St. Louis married a wine producer? She did. She learned so much about wine business in the last years.
So one of the things that has become, I would say, a buzzword here in the States that I know Giulio and Janie and we've talked about before is this idea of natural winemaking and minimal intervention winemaking. And I was wondering if you could comment on the centuries of history that go into this concept of natural that for us is now seeming trendy.
Yeah, natural and sustainable are definitely not new trends here in Tuscany. That's how wineries have survived here for many years, and it's certainly an integral part of the Morris Farms philosophy. What Giulio was explaining about obtaining two different levels of rosé had to do with a process that they use called bleeding. So when they're making a Morellino di Scansano, they bleed the grapes. They take out a certain percentage of the pressed juice,
15 to 20%.
15 to 20%, in order to make the remaining juice that's still in contact with the grape skins, because the grape skins give so much oomph, more color, more punch to the liquid. So it's concentrating the flavors to make the Morellino better. And at the same time, they don't just simply throw that 15 to 20% of juice away. They're using it to make their local market bulk rosé. This is one of many things that Morris Farms does to be more efficient, to be more sustainable, and creating better quality products along the way.
It's our trick to make more concentration of color in a grape that Sangiovese by itself is not known to have a strong color, without cropping, without making too much green harvest that would be a higher cost. We can concentrate more the color, acting in the cellar with this process without adding any chemicals. So anything particular, we let the grapes work by themselves. And so less juice with more skins, the final result is darker color, for example.
All right, well, we are coming up on 5 after 3 here, so I just want to open it up quickly. We'll have about 5 more minutes. If anybody at all has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or unmute yourselves and go ahead and ask away.
Time flies.
Time does fly.
It does.
I didn't realize that. I thought that was just the beginning.
He was just getting started.
The second glass makes more relaxed.
I guess we'll do it all over again now that we're on second glass, right? Start from the top. I guess I know, Janie, you and I have talked before too about this idea of sustainability, and that like nothing goes to waste has become very popular with the food movement here in America too. People are talking about, you know, snout to tail is one of those food kind of buzzwords, and that it's so interesting because it's such a new concept here, and it seems so kind of like exciting and cool and new, but it's this thing that's existed for hundreds of years where you guys are.
And I dove headfirst into this snout to tail lifestyle, I guess you could call it. I live in the house with both of my in-laws. Adolfo is now a renowned in our family chef. He cooks every lunch and every dinner for us. So we are incredibly lucky because every single day he surprises us with, you know, a variety within the menu, but also perfect execution of cucina toscana.
And his fridge is always pretty sad.
Yes, his fridge is always very sad. There's almost nothing in it, but he has shown me on a daily basis how you can take the most humble ingredients and turn it into a lavish feast that's worthy of serving your guests. He comes from post-World War II Italy, where you do not throw anything away. And I think a lot of people around the world, in the States especially during these times, are probably, you know, digging a little deeper into what it means to not waste when it comes to food. And I've certainly received an education in the last year and a half from how my father-in-law is able to do that for us on a daily basis. And it's just part and parcel of the mentality here. And certainly the wine is no different.
When her mom calls her, okay, tell me what was your lunch? And she starts, oh, how do you come both?
Yeah, I'm gonna need pictures, daily pictures of your lunches and dinners. Well, does anybody else have any other questions for Jenny and Giulio? Maybe something that we haven't covered yet?
So when it will be legally possible, I would be happy if we will do this in person. I mean, we can even keep the distance and so on, but I like to have the people here. I like to see the eyes and talk with the people. I don't like to see just a cell phone in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of Giulio's favorite things to do, is to share his wine in person and to be able to experience that with people. So we do encourage people to come and visit. We've got plenty of opportunities to host in different ways when you do get in touch and come our way.
Yeah.
And for those of you who, you know, your mouths are watering during this because you're seeing these beautiful bottles in front of you, if anybody needs info about where they can find Morris Farms wine, please email info at kindredvines, that's vines with a V.com. And I will make sure that we can help you find any of these wines wherever you're located, and we'll try to get them in your hands.
I'm proud to say that Kindred is the most supportive selection that is outside Europe and probably even outside Italy. Outside Europe, for sure, is the place where you can find the biggest Morris Farm selection. I'm very proud of this long-term relationship that we have started together.
Yeah.
For me, it's Kindred is the importer in Michigan since ever, and the same face to speak always with the same people makes me very happy about.
I've got a comment from a cousin in Virginia. You know, the virus has affected our daily life, mostly because of the regulations surrounding it. But our numbers remain particularly low in this area of Tuscany. And I can't think of a better place to spend a quarantine than with the fresh sea breezes and the sun that seems to cleanse everything around it. It's been a
good wine, good food.
Good food and good wine helps. These are scary times, but we've had you know, it's been an interesting time, but I feel like we've really learned a lot, and overall, we're well here.
Yeah, if you guys haven't seen the sunset video of Giulio that we posted on Facebook, that in and of itself is like, it's therapeutic, even just seeing it and not being there. So I can't imagine being there. So check that out on our Facebook.
Free haircut, but
I mean, I have a father who cooks very well. I have a wife who knows how to keep season in her hands, and I mean, I'm taking advantage. It would be illegal. I mean, today I had the control of the police, and they asked me about the haircut. I said, no, my wife. It would be impossible. I said, yeah, it's my wife. Even this, I have to Italian police. Why your hairs are so good after the quarantine?
Well, thank you, Giulio and Janie. And I know you just mentioned about everything that's going on in the world, you know, right now, and that just puts a lot of things into perspective. That this is just, you know, one moment in time, and then you get to speak and spend time with the two of you and Giulio, who's just so proud of his family history and knowing that he's going to take it that far into the future. There's longevity with something like this, and that really, you know, a meeting like this and looking at your wines, hearing about the history puts a lot of things into perspective. So. You know, we appreciate your time. We appreciate your knowledge and your passion for not only wine, but Tuscany and Morris Farms as well.
I really hope to see you soon in person, and to be or in USA or you come back to Italy.
Absolutely.
Probably with a baby, Chuck.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll send you new pictures soon.
Buona
fortuna. Alla prossima, Giulio.
Oh, I heard
Buona fortuna. Grazie.
Grazie.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you everybody for joining. Thank you to Janie and Giulio for walking us through that. Just a reminder, we've got tons of virtual events planned for the next couple of weeks. We're doing virtual happy hours on Fridays. We're doing these classes every Wednesday, and we're releasing staff training videos every Monday. If you need any more information about our events, it's all on our Facebook page. That's Kindred Vines. So go ahead and check that out. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Hi, Giulio and Janie. So good to see you both.
Hi.